Yeah. So I guess we can start off by, just you telling a little bit about yourself, what you do, and your background.
Well, my name is Andrew Lownie. I'm have had two jobs really. Most of my career, I've been a literary agent selling authors' books to publishers. But I've also had a sideline in writing biographies, and I've written a series of biographies. Most recently, a biography of Edward VIII, who became the Duke of Windsor. But before that, in 2019, I published a book called The Mountbattens, Their Lives and Loves, which was the story of Dickie and Edwina Mountbatten and the contrast between their rather racy private life and their public partnership. And of course, they were the last viceroy and vicereine of India. And this book I began researching in 2015, 2016, and was published, I think, certainly in Britain in 2019, I think the same year in India. And I've continued to work on the Mountbattens, even as I've been writing other books and researching them. There's been a long battle to secure access to their private diaries and letters, which were bought by the British government to be open to scholars, but for some reason were closed by the institution who bought them, Southampton University. And so I've had a very expensive and long legal fight to get these diaries released, as they should be. And in November 2021, we eventually had a hearing. The material was released, over 30,000 pages of diaries and letters, some 99% of the material. But there is still some material closed, most notably the correspondence between Edwina and Nehru. Now, this is a very important historical source for scholars, I think, which shed a lot of light on partition, the attitude of the Mountbattens, how unbiased they were, their relationship with Nehru, but also with other Indian leaders and indeed with the Pakistan leader Jinnah. So this is the fight that continues, and I'm very grateful to support for those on the Indian subcontinent who supported this important campaign, because this is a case of history being censored by governments, perhaps to cover embarrassing information. But these events took place over 75 years ago, and I think history now needs to be told. Everyone involved is dead, and we have a situation where members of the royal family are leaking stories about the present, and yet we can't discover, as historians, what happened in the past.
Right. So, whatever you talked about in that light, like in your opinion, what is exactly the significance of private paper collections under the post-colonial authority, like in today's time, or what can we get from them, as as practitioners of history or just as citizens in general?
Well, private sources are very important. I mean, when I research the books, I rely clearly on a variety of sources. There'll be interviews with people if they're still alive. There'll be secondary sources, either memoirs or other histories, and those can be very useful. But primary sources are, for me, the most important source. I want to go right back to the original material. Now, some of this material is in public archives, the Nehru Memorial Library, the British Library, the National Archives in Britain, the Royal Archives. But many of these papers are either in university archives, like Southampton, which has tens of thousands of pages of Mountbatten material. He left most of his material there. And Churchill College, Cambridge is another good repository. But I'm also reliant on private papers. Now, these can be lodged in public archives, like the British Library or Churchill. They can be also still with the families. But the great advantage of private archives is these are the private papers of people, letters, correspondence that they never expected perhaps anyone to read, their personal diaries. In the case of Mountbatten, his letters to his wife. And so they can be much more honest about situations. They're not writing for posterity. They're very immediate. They will give us details of what happened at a particular time, who saw whom, what their thoughts were about them, what their feelings were about certain issues. So it's a very revealing insight into people's minds and into their interactions with others. And that's why the Mountbatten Diaries and letters were such an important source. And I'm very sorry not to be able to use them for my biography, because it would have given me their movements, who they saw, what they thought of them, and just the details that build up the sort of mosaic that you need to do when you write a biography. So I'm a great believer in private archives. They don't tend to be censored, as some of the public archives are. They're not skewed for posterity, as again, public archives can be. People like Mountbatten, for example, dictated details of his meetings with the Indian leaders in 1947. But that was his own version of events, and this has been taken as the gospel truth. So if we have this, in a sense, other source, either papers from other people talking about their interaction with him, letters, for example, from Nehru to his sister would be helpful, but also Mountbatten's own reaction to the events. That's going to be a very, very useful source.
Right. Also, how do you think that the publication of the Mountbatten Diaries might, enlighten us more about the partition of India, which happened in 47?
Well, I mean, we now have 99% of them. I hope that scholars will use them. The handwriting is very difficult. Some material is typed, and Edwina's handwriting is better. And some of the material clearly is only about their own domestic life. It relates arguments they've had, discussions they've had about their family, just their day-to-day life, who they had tea with. But, there is important material here which will, as I say, shed light on their attitudes, their how biased they were and not, or how impartial they were, who they saw, when they saw them, what the people said. For example, Mountbatten may not have actually told the truth in his accounts of events each day when they were typed up by a stenographer. He may have only given a very biased view of events, but here, hopefully, he will give a completely free and unbiased account of what happened. So this is really raw history that historians can use. And I think anyone writing about Indian independence, attitudes to India by the British, and particularly by the British ruling class, will benefit from this. So this is something for Indian scholars, but it's also for scholars who are interested in interwar British history, the story of the Royal Navy, and all sorts of things. So it's a really important source, and that's why there was such an attempt to buy this material for Southampton when it came up for sale in 2010.
But as a student, what I was thinking was that why is there such an urge to not let these kind of sources be available for people in public, or or just whatever that you are fighting for, it's not such an easy process. So why is that so?
Well, it's a good question why this material was censored. I think what happened was that one particular archivist at Southampton read the material, thought there was sensitive material that related to the royal family, and instead of then just quite carefully going through it and taking out any material which was sensitive, which is allowed under Freedom of Information rules, he just closed the whole archive. He then, I think outrageously, asked if he could edit the 1947 diary himself, which would have been, I suspect, a version that took out anything that was embarrassing. And it's embarrassment which is at the bottom of all these things. This is about institutions protecting powerful individuals. The Mountbattens and the royal family were heavily involved in the censoring of this material, though the Mountbatten family had sold it very freely. And if it had gone to an American university, it would have been available a decade ago. But this is the government trying to censor the past. It's trying to curate the story rather than what happened. And that may be to protect the dignity of the crown. It may be to protect Anglo-Indian relations. Who knows? They've never explained. There were no grounds to release this material. It was bought with public monies under an acceptance and lieu scheme, which is a tax break. And the basis of that is it is to be seen. And the Information Commissioner, who ruled in my favour, said that this material should be released. And the government, instead of obeying that decision notice, and this is the regulator on release of information, actually fought the case. And then they just completely gave in, literally just before the hearing, having built up huge costs for me. And I think their attempt was their hope was that I would go away, I wouldn't be able to afford this case, and that they could continue to keep this material quiet. And I didn't, and so they were forced, basically, before the hearing took place, to release this material. And as I say, I hope scholars will use this material because it is a very important insight into the history of our two countries.
Yeah, and although sources like these are were situated in the past, they can also help us to connect vital dots in the present as well, I think.
Yes,
So
absolutely. I mean, we are reassessing the empire. We've got a whole generation of scholars who come with completely open minds and with new material. We're hearing the voices of people who've never been heard before, particularly from the Indian subcontinent. And it's important, if we're to tell the truth about the past, that we have as much information as possible and not this completely partial view. So as part of, in a sense, rebuilding this story, we need the material from the Mountbattens. We also need the material clearly from Indian sources. I think there's material clearly still closed at the Indian side. I think part of the problem with the Nehru and Edwina correspondence, which are still closed, is because of objections by Nehru's family. But, these are events that happened a long time ago. Everyone is dead. It's important the story is told. But you're absolutely right. If we are to engage in the present with the past, if we are to recognize that maybe mistakes were made, that there is another version of events, then we need to have all the information.
yeah. Um, Also, if you can talk about the Edwin and Nehru correspondence, which yeah, I personally have been very interested to know about that.
Well, we know that Nehru and Edwina were very close, that there was an instant attraction between them when she arrived in Delhi in March 1947, that relationship, whether it was spiritual, romantic, intellectual, sexual, developed very, very quickly. The family and others have put up all sorts of stories claiming that Nehru was impotent, that it was a completely platonic relationship. But from my research, I think it's pretty clear that it was also a sexual relationship. It was a very profound relationship, probably the most profound of her life and possibly his. And they worked very closely together, particularly during the crisis moment in August 1947 with all the violence. And she continued to stay in touch with him. They saw each other twice a year. She came out every spring to India. He came out every autumn to Britain. And they wrote to each other sometimes 3 times a day. So it's a very extensive correspondence. Now, this is not just the story of a love affair, because she may well have shaped his views, given him advice in the early days of the Republic. And of course, he must have been a crucial confidant to her. How far did their close relationship impact on partition? How far did it change the sympathies of the Mountbattens? So perhaps they were less sympathetic to the Pakistan position and the Muslim position. And so there are important political and historical aspects to this relationship. It's not completely just interested in their private life. So I think, for scholars, there will be some very interesting revelations about the influence they had on each other, on what particular events they may have shaped the way things happened, and their attitude to particular people. And this is part of history, and this was brought at the same time as the diaries and letters to be seen by scholars, and it should be open. And this is a campaign that I continue to mount. I hope I'll have the support of scholars, both in Britain and the Indian subcontinent, because this will be a very important new source in telling the story of those dramatic years.
Do you think that the publication of these letters and these diaries would also kind of change our look at the nature of British colonization in general?
Yes, well, I think it'll certainly show, I suspect, that the British were biased towards the Hindus and Congress. I think it will reveal certain attitudes that they held towards Indians and the country. which may not be attitudes that perhaps sit well in the present climate and they may feel embarrassed about. Who knows? It's very difficult to speculate when one can't see the material. But any reassessment of this period, I suspect, will have impact on uh, where we are now. I mean, it's not just about history, because these clearly are very sensitive issues. The questions of Kashmir and others go on and are constantly debated and are political as well as historical questions. So, of course, it'll have an impact on daily life now.
Right. Uh, Also, like, for how long have you been involved in this campaign, and how can we know about, know more about your campaign on the net, or in whatever way you suggest?
Well, I've been trying to secure access to this material since 2016. We now have, as I say, 99% of the material. It's on the Southampton University website. People can look at the diaries there if they just type in Mountbatten Diaries, Southampton University. But there are still 100 redactions, I think, which are completely innocuous. So that is a fight that we need to have to make sure those redactions are taken away. There is clearly the release of this Nehru Edwin correspondence. And if people want to follow the campaign, they just need to put in my name. I have a Twitter account, a Facebook account, LinkedIn account, all of which cover articles I've written, interviews I have, coverage in the media. There's also a crowd justice page. This has cost me £500,000, which I'm still trying to pay back. And I've been able to get £75,000 of that from a crowd justice crowdfunding organization. And if you type in my name with crowd justice, that will bring up the page, and one can donate there. And we've got over 1,000 donations from different people. Doesn't matter whether it's 10 or 20 pounds or more, it all adds up, and it all helps to secure this important resource and collection for everyone. It's no use to me. I've moved on. I've written another book since. I'm about to publish a second book. So I've moved on. But for other scholars and for students of Indian history, it's very important this collection is made available.
Yeah, right. And what is the nature of the other papers that are available in Southampton?
Well, the material that was available even when I wrote the book is very extensive. So these go back to school reports, to uh, letters to other members of the family. He literally kept everything, even down to details about his houses. There are, for example, travel diaries there, so slightly different diaries. There are interviews that were done when people wrote his biography. There is material that was collected by others for possible books on him, and his correspondence with those people. So we have his letters home, for example, to his parents when he was at school, and to others. So it's only really this collection to his wife that's closed. There are also papers from other members of the family. Some of those are closed, some of those are opened. But it's literally tens of thousands of pages of documents. So really important collection there. But it would be good to have more material, because clearly the most sensitive material has been kept back. And I think it's now time that we should be allowed access to that.
Yeah. It's really high time that we realize how important these documents are for us, because after a point of time, even like, it will be kind of late to access this, and even if we can access it, it will be too late to kind of absorb whatever it has to offer to us and then work upon it. So yeah, I think we are approaching the end of our interview, and any concluding remarks that you have, or anything you want to add?
No, I'm very grateful to you for your support and for this interview and being able to highlight this issue. I'd hoped that there would be a release for the 75th anniversary of independence, because clearly this is a point where everyone is reassessing the relationship between our two countries and the legacy of empire. It would have been a good opportunity, because clearly there was media attention focused on this issue, to release material. But the fight goes on, the story continues. I think there will be new revelations about the interrelationship between India and Britain, for many years to come. But the sooner that we can get this material out, the sooner we will be able to address many of these questions, which still are important ones for both our countries.
Right. Thank you so much, Andrew, for your time. It has been great to talk to you. And yeah, we look forward to more collaborations if time permits. So yeah, thank you
That
so
would be
much.
that would be lovely. Thank you so much for your interest, and I wish you well with all your work too.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It means a lot.
Okay.
Thanks.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.